Hi, my lovers. I am sitting here. I've been meditating a lot today and processing various little triggers that have come up in my awareness, and also a stream of thought that's been going on. I recently watched a documentary on YouTube about the cobalt mining industry, which is mining materials for like smartphones and electronic car batteries and stuff. And of course, there's so much shadow in modern, profiteering and trade. I think about corporate greed, but then I think about just our modern convenient lifestyles. And I kind of just intuitively tracked back to like around the world wars back in like early 20th century, and then the introduction of radio and television. And I think about the kind of black and white advertising at the movie theater propagating popcorn and different junk foods, and even think about advertising for things like cigarettes, and then of course more modern day, like just pharmaceuticals and the big, and I'm right there with the masses around like shopping at superstores and convenience stores. And so then I started to think, so then this cobalt, right, and thinking about how so much, maybe even the majority, although that could be false statement, but the majority of like large corporation is connected to modern enslavement. And it really gets more and more, it seems to get more and more difficult to regulate any of these industries, because the corporations are connected to governmental, I want to say like lobbyists and stuff. So a lot of money funded into politics and government is connected to corporation that obviously like want to stay or have power, because they feed agendas into that political power or narrative. And then lately I've been, because I do know some people who are very earthy, live on the land, have gardens and grow food and do all that wonderful stuff. And I recently learned how to chop kindling. So like, and then because I had this whole thing of like, when I'm visiting there, I quite like the whole process of going out to collect my wood to then warm the cottage, and then it's really well insulated. It's like all eco, but it's a little kind of quite small cottage, so it just needs the wood burner, and then that's more than enough heat. And there's a circular connection around like chopping the wood from the land, and then like stockpiling it, getting the kindling, and yeah, it just feels very like holistic and connected. Plus there's a physicality, so there's a sense of like putting the work in to get the heat. And I personally find that exciting or like fun, enjoyable. And then I watch these and I'm just have a certain awareness of the world economy, and I think about these slave laborers and transferring labor over to different countries, and then a lot of our countries, or I live in the UK, and I do hear people say like the natives of this country don't want to do certain types of work anymore. And so the connection I got was that like this whole modern convenient living is like digging a hole into the layers of the collective enslavement paradigm. And then I feel like this is maybe like there's so much more complexity to it all, but that a lot of the kind of capitalist profiteering paradigm really does come from this place of greed. And or then, as I say, greed, where does greed come from? Does it come from a false perception? Does it come from disconnection? I think because just the common person, I would say, although maybe again this is just me, my own bubble, is not greedy. Like I think most people are caring, and a lot of people that are hardworking are very then I say hardworking. I'm like, everyone I know on a certain level is hardworking through their inner demons, working through their battles, working multiple jobs just to, you know, pay the rent kind of thing. And looking after children, looking after people in their lives. And then we have this sort of, it's almost like this modern economy which is like stretching itself apart. And I feel this energetic sort of endeavoring to transform any sticky, lacky, like injustice around the social paradigms that have existed and brought us to this point, and then to really ground the energy of being at home here, like being like that we're not like because essentially it's like the paradigm is set up so that we all have to like work, and we're kind of programmed to prepare ourselves for work just to live, which somehow just, it's like, which then traces to like this, the debt-based economy, which again, in a very real way, is a false economy. There's no, and now we can see that we're shifting into digitalization, right? With all the crypto Bitcoin. I'm not particularly like into that. Like I all think a lot of it is coming from this egoic push to have power, and again a lot of those systems, as it were, going bust or being proven to be fraudulent. And so in my personal reality, I can witness these sort of multitudinous layers of power grabs and money grabs, and coming from this sense of like a holistic, more grounded, more harmonious sense, like I can only relate it back to this awareness of the shift has to come from like each and every single one of us, essentially, right? Like this, to not, because I don't think it's about wanting or even desire. I think it's like a program, a fear program of thinking we need a status or need stuff or need to look a certain way, dress a certain way, whatever it might be. Because I even had a shift, you guys know I like talk about, I buy secondhand, I shop on eBay, and that's I started that about 2011, 2012, but throughout my even adolescence, it resonated. Buying charity clothing and stuff like that resonated, just one, because it was cheaper, but I often found the way you can organize your style can be a little bit more bespoke or individual, because you're not buying stuff from the high street, right? You're not buying the mainstream propagated, like, this is what you should be wearing. And as I say that, I'm like, and there's nothing inherently wrong with all that, although in a sense there is a distortion, because it's not. And as well, I look at kind of multi-generational war wounding, and or the even the isms that distort and divide us all, rather than the present moment reality of the individual work that we can do by holding space for our triggers, right? And keep processing. Because for me, the trigger that led me to finally sharing these streams that have come to mind around convenience and enslavement, and how it's all kind of interconnected, is to absolve and to transform the trigger around lack or injustice, like bills or property prices or just price of things. It's like, I do have this, I'm like, oh God, who affords this? Or like, in the UK, I sometimes look at properties, and because I'm Canadian, like the value for property is really different around like what you can get for a certain amount of money in Canada is pretty different from what you can get in parts of the UK. And it's like, yeah. And then another rando, did I talk about this? I might have talked about this in one of the shares, but not about that 2008 big collapse in the United States around property. And part of my sense is that I think that potentially might be what we're approaching on, but like on a bigger level. I'm saying that going like, oh, but and maybe lots of people are talking about that anyway, like because I think there's a lot of people in, different circles that have been sensing this sort of, economic collapse and or, yeah. and how we roll out. And that's again part of the shifting paradigm. What really matters, it's not the money and the economy and the corporations, it's one another. Looking after ourselves, looking after our homes, looking after the people in our lives, looking after our gardens, our pets, right? Like the physical present moment reality, and then disciplining our minds not to probably go too much away from that or too far from that. As far as like, even I find talking to friends, family, whatevs, it's like when I get into that idea realm, which is can be fun, you know, brainstorming or just visioning and yeah, I just find as soon as I get too far in the future, it gets like distorted. It doesn't feel real. It's like, well, and then sometimes I had someone be like, I don't like, I'm not feeling good. So it's like, that's another, I guess a thing to be aware of too. If it's starting to not feel good, don't need to think about it. Don't need to go there. Right. I think that's all I'm going to talk about. I'm aware that I've just kind of hopped on. I'm chilling where I live in my jacket because electricity bills are so high here. And I dare say, as I'm venturing through my first winter, that there's just like bare minimum insulation. So even when the heats are on, the air, it just kind of escapes, and then cold air like permeates through all the windows and the walls. And that's, you know, it's just one of those things. And at some point you just think, well, this, you know, here we are, this is what it is. I can be conservative, I can wear layers, and yet I feel like so much of me is about wanting a better world for everybody. And so I share these little like triggers around the lack or the fear, or I sometimes get this like sort of heat feeling, almost like a bit of a rage, like an infuriating rage at just the level of corruption. Or, and again, that when you think about the stretching apart of our classes and the ruling class of the very extraordinarily wealthy, and where that, if you trace it back historically, and where and how that comes from, and what is it in us that has a drive to have so much, whilst there's people that have so little, and that's often something I've not been able to quite understand, is that why is it that those people want just more stuff, more planes, or more fancy things, and sell more products and products within the same framework of just taking that money to either hoard, put in different places, and like build bigger houses and projects and things, but none of it is actually serving or supporting the like care of people who need basic things. And I'm like, if that were to balance out a bit, surely the world would be a more harmonious, loving, like the Shire, like the Hobbits is. We just have to destroy the ring. What does the ring represent? I guess it's our own human desire, like thinking that ring is more powerful than like the heart, you know? An addiction, I guess, an addiction to which can only really come from a very profound primordial wound of separation. I always come back to that. It was connected to like really early insights of like it was trying to make sense of the craziness of this world, and certainly on a painful, like, why do we do such horrible things to each other? We're en masse, you know. Anywho, there's a little chit chat for me, Liver Supreme. I am posting this on the Patreon channel first, and then I'll share publicly. If you guys liked, feel free to subscribe, share. I obviously offer the tarot readings. You can work with me in the Yoga Vibratory, buy merchandise, and it's also just really, I think, useful to like share content if it aligns with you. And I guess it's the shameless plugging of like sharing people's work, right? And in this like new world that we support one another, we support individuals and small businesses, that we obviously would feel support us. If you're not vibing it, no, it's okay. um, but like, yeah, that we support one another and be more discerning, and or try to withdraw some of our support or completely boycott it if possible, major corporations, which I don't blame people. It's more the structure of things that have almost taken power, have, like, you know, corporations, they have a life of their own, and we've almost like submitted our individual human conscious power to those corporate entities, right? So it's more about just one by one, like withdrawing our sense of like that somehow has power over us, and being more conscious, you know, which that's maybe the tough bit, is like the amount of reflection, sacred solitude, the amount of time that you might spend alone. But at this point, I can pretty safely say, like, you know, we get through things. It takes longer than I think our quick fix culture and our programming would want, and certainly that the ego would want. But miraculously, we can ride out really deep, ugly, transformational, shameful, seemingly unforgivable things. We can move through those energies in the light of our awareness and keep a deep sense of faith, and eventually, I guess you could say, like, end up in a different world. And then you kind of go, okay, and now what? Now what do you want from me? You know, like, or what do I want? What do I want for me if we're all one? And I just think of living simply, really, in harmony with the planet, having people we dig on, and then like learning, kind of reconnecting a bit with nature, but with all of our modern conveniences that don't harm the planet or one another. So if anything, you could say, oh my gosh, there's exciting times ahead for us as humanity. You know, oh, it's deep and ugly to shine light on the shadow, as a lot of us know, but we can evolve through, and we can make ourselves and shine light for one another, and as far as a more compassionate species. And my biggest prayer would be that one day we talk about things like the war cycles and military war complex and all these like layers of corruption and power. We can talk about that as a part of the past. That would be amazing. How's Shazam, you guys? Thanks for listening. Thanks for being my internet friends. Let's speak to you soon. Take care. Peace out, my lovers.